Good evening. Welcome to Around Town Tellers, Stories on Friday for April 10th, 2020. My name is Pat Forrest, and I am going to be your host for tonight. The theme for tonight is Stories of Hope. Although it was chosen last June, it is so appropriate for our current situation. Our live concert was cancelled last month at the Unitarian Church in Nanaimo, much to the disappointment of our tellers and our audience. So we decided we would try an online version. Many thanks are needed for Rachel Muller, who videoed, taped all of the tellers on Zoom, and to Greg Clark Johnson, who stitched and knit all the various pieces together to bring you the show as it comes to you tonight. We hope that you enjoy the show. I had Googled quotations on hope that I was going to share for you tonight, but I have the privilege of being able to preview the stories, and I know that I don't need to add anything to the tellers and their stories. So please sit back and enjoy the show. Our first teller tonight is Lee Porteous. Now, for those of you who attend Stories on Fridays, you will know that Lee is a very popular host and teller. Lee comes from Victoria and is a member of the Victoria Storytelling Guild there, and she loves to tell stories. So we are very happy to have her with us tonight. So please welcome Lee as she tells her story entitled The $100 Bill.
My name is Lee Porteous. The story I'm going to tell you comes to me from Kathy Compass, whom you may have seen up in Parksville with her friend Mary Wiggin. It's called The $100 Bill. Back in the 1890s, in the panhandle of Oklahoma, there was a terrible drought. Not much water, not much grass, the cattle were suffering. And so the rancher called his foreman to him and said, "Joe, I have a tough job for you to do. I want you to sell off most of our cattle, but first go through the herd and pick out the ones that are in the best shape, and we will create a seed herd for when we can recover from this. And I want you to take the herd down to Dodge City with the boys and sell them for what you can get, and then let the boys go. I just can't keep them on until times get better." And so Joe did that, and he spent a week in Dodge City because it took him that long to sell off these scrawny cattle. And he didn't mind because he was in the hotel for the whole week, and in the evenings he'd go down to the card tables and amuse himself. And then when he got back, he gave the rancher all of the papers for the transactions and asked if he could head into town to do an errand. Well, of course, the rancher said. So what he did is he went first to the little saloon in the town and run by Miss Sally, and he gave her a $100 bill. He said that he told her he'd won this at the card games, and that the last time he and the boys were all there, they busted up the place some, and he wanted to help pay for those damages. She was amazed. She said, "Well, Joe, I know the boys are feeling so bad because they were losing their jobs, and I never expected to have the damages paid for, but I'm really, really grateful." As soon as he had left, she went across the street to the grocer's, and she gave him the $100 and said, "Please put this on my account. I'll pay the rest when I can, but times are hard." Hard indeed. The grocer had half the town on tabs, and so he's very grateful to get this $100. And as soon as she had left, he went down the street to the funeral director and gave him the $100. And he said, "You know, last month when my poor wife died, I couldn't have afforded even a plain pine box for her. But you took care of everything and never mentioned anything about payment. So please, take this $100 on account. Well, the funeral director was very happy to have that. And that afternoon, he went out to the livery stable where his black horses ate hay and oats, no matter whether he had business or not, and gave it to the manager of the livery stable. Well, the manager immediately hurried out to the farmer that he bought the hay and the oats from on credit. The farmer was delighted. That $100 would help him pay for the rent on at least part of the land that he was using to grow those grains and hay. The rancher. And he gave the rancher the $100 bills on account of his rent. Well, that night, around the dinner table, there was only the cook and the rancher and Joe. And the rancher made a little speech anyway of his appreciation of the work that Joe had done and gave Joe that $100 bill. Well, Joe thanked him for that. And then the rancher said, I'm really sorry that I have to ask you this. You just got back from Dodge City and a week away. But looks like there's a storm coming and lightning. And I would like you to go out and keep the cattle calm. We wouldn't want to lose our seed herd. And Joe said, oh, that's fine. I'm tired of the soft hotel beds anyway. So he went up and he took all his gear and he set up his camp and he set up the fire just as the sun was going down and he could see the clouds gathering. And he took out that $100 bill and he looked at it carefully and then he touched it to the flames and it started on fire and he watched it burn to the last little corner that he dropped into the fire. Because he thought it had done all the good that it was going to be able to do. And besides, from the moment he had won it in the card game, he realized it was counterfeit. Story that Kathy Compass sent to me, and you may remember her from her performances in Parksville with Mary Wiggin. If it has a title, I don't know what it is. But it happens in one of those traditional Irish pubs. And one night, a fellow walks in that nobody knows, and he sits down at a table, and he orders 3 beer from the bartender. And the bartender puts the 3 beer on his table. And over the next hour or so, he works his way through all 3 beer. Then he orders another 3. Same thing, works his way through it. And a third set. And then he weaves off home. Same thing the next night. 3 beer. He drinks them by himself. It goes through the evening. The third evening, the bartender can't help his curiosity, and the patrons have been asking too. This is such an odd thing to do. So the bartender asks him, so why are you ordering the 3 beer and drinking them like this? He said, whoa, well, my 2 brothers and I, we always drank together, but one of them is in America and one of them's in Australia now. And before they left, we promised that we would do this and that way be drinking with each other. Well, the barman thought that was a pretty good explanation. He told the other patrons and they thought that made sense to them. And so people would watch him as he did this night after night. And in fact, tourists would come because he got a bit famous, this guy, drinking with his brothers. One night he came in and he only ordered 2 beer. Well, the bartender's heart sank, but he gave him the 2 beer and 2 more when it came time and 2 more after that. And then the next night he came in, still 2. And he couldn't help himself. The bartender went over to the fellow and said, you know, I'm really sorry, and I want you to accept my condolences at the death of your brother. And the patron said, well, your brother isn't dead, but you're only drinking 2. Oh, he said, I gave up drink for Lent, but they didn't.
Thank you, Lee. That's such a great story of paying it back and paying it forward, showing what a little bit can do so much, especially in today's times. Our next teller is Deborah Graham. This is Deborah's second time telling for Around Town Tellers. She took the art and craft of storytelling workshop a year ago, and this is, as I said, her second time on our stage, telling a story that she has written. She lives in Ladysmith, where she is a writer and a personal historian. So please welcome Deborah.
Hi, this is one of my own stories, and it is entitled Hope. There once was a boy who lived on the edges of things. He lived in the thin world, and he felt the feelings that ride on the wind, feelings from here and now, but also from other times and places. Often, he was more aware of these things than of the simple life unfolding before him. In fact, life was good for the boy when he was small. Springs were wet, summers were fair, and crops were robust. Then one year, sleet fell in June, and a cold wind blew into the village and stayed to shake the cottages all summer. The crops wilted in the fields, and hunger entered the village and sat at kitchen tables with its mouth open. The boy could feel the unease of the villagers in the hard sighs of the women as they went about their work, and in the shifting of the men's boots as they fidgeted in church. Then, like a pot boiling over, civil war exploded across the land. The boy's father and his brothers left to join the fight, and within a month, word came that they had all perished in a great battle in the south. Days later, the enemy army came into the village. They destroyed some cottages, and what food there was laid by they took. Hunger became starvation, followed closely by sickness, contagion, and death. His mother managed to feed them with oats and occasional eggs, and she continued administering her herbal remedies in the village, until one day she took to bed with a fever herself, and suddenly, unbelievably, she was gone. The boy's sister clung to him, and he tried to look after her, but she too fell ill. He brewed teas and he held her hands in his, as he'd seen his mother do, but she too departed from this world. The misery of the thin world had fallen into the boy's life like an axe, and his pain knew no reckoning. In a fever of grief, he stumbled to the church, where he prostrated himself on the stone floor and called out to God. Why? But the church was more silent than the night, and he returned to his cottage where the ghosts of his family swirled about him. He lived his nights as in an open wound, and during the day he sat on his steps, and he stared and he saw nothing. One day, an old man came and sat beside him. "You cannot go on like this," he said. "You must replant your father's fields." "I cannot," he said, "for I have no hope." "Son," said the man, "you are manacled in despair, but you must not let the suffering of this world claim you." "I welcome it," said the boy. "I wish to join my family in the darkness." "God forbids it," said the old man. "You must seek hope." "How can I when I have none with which to seek? You need hope to seek it," said the boy. Well, the next day, the old man returned with a burlap sack. "This sack is full of stones," he said. "You must go on a journey. Each day, take a stone. Let your hand that is warmed with the blood of your heart that flows through your body warm the stone. Give it some of your sorrow. At the end of the day, cast it into the stream. Follow the river and you will find food. And you will find more stones when these run out. Someday you will find hope." Well, the boy continued sitting on the steps as the seasons changed about him. But then one day, he took his mother's long green cloak, put it into her leather bag with as many bundles of dried herbs as would fit, slung the bag over his shoulder, picked up the sack of stones, and left the village. He followed the river, and each day he took a stone, and he concentrated on giving his sadness to it, and then he cast it in the stream. He traded his mother's herbs for food, and when they ran out, he gathered more and sold them fresh. For 3 long years, he wandered like this until his entire focus was on the earth beneath his feet and the water flowing in the river, and so he calmed his mind. Then one day, an old woman sat down beside him, and as she shared her basket of bread with him, he told her his story. "You do well," she said. "Slowly you are healing." "Perhaps," he said, "but I still have no hope. It matters not to me where I go or what happens to me." "It is possible to find hope," said the old woman, "but you must raise yourself above so that you can see beyond yourself." The next day, the young man looked across the valley. "That mountain, I must climb it," he said. And so he wound his way up the mountain. He passed through a village of cottages scattered along the ridges, and he came to a small hut in a clearing near the top of the mountain. From there, he saw what he had never seen before. He saw the vast expanse of the land, with its rolling hills and scattered villages and towns disappearing into the distance. He saw the river winding through it like a silver snake, and beyond he saw for the first time the crystal glimmer of the sea. As the sun went down and night cloaked the world, he saw star upon star reaching far, far beyond the earth. All night he sat there, and he felt the energy of the universe pulling him into its incomprehensible vastness and connecting everything, all the lives that were, the lives that had been, and the lives to come. And he understood in an instant how each life is brief, like the twinkle of a star, yet as imperishable as the source of that light. A great calmness such as he had never experienced came upon him. And then he was filled with joy and with love for every living thing. He was sitting there the next day still when a child's voice drew him back. A young boy stood in front of him, his face creased with distress. "Wise man of the mountain, my sister is dying, please help." Well, the young man did not want to disappoint the boy by telling him that he was not a wise man. So he gave him a bundle of herbs to boil for fever. But after he left, he kept thinking about him and his mother. And as he was laying his mother's long green cloak out on the bed, he thought of her, and he knew what she would do. And so he put on the green cloak, and he wrapped the scarf around his face, and he went down to the village. A vision of the young boy spooning medicine into the little girl's mouth drew him to the correct cottage, whereupon, bobbing his head, he entered as his mother would have done, as if he needed no invitation. He took the cup from the young boy and he fed the little girl, and he took her hands in his, and he said a silent prayer, and then he went back up the mountain. Well, the next day, the little girl was better, and word spread of the wise man with his medicines and of the old woman with her healing hands. And if anyone thought they were one and the same, no one said so, for that was not how the people thought. A wise man was a wise man after all, and a healing woman a healing woman. Well, the boy appeared at the hut with a basket of acorns. "Why, thank you," said the young man. "But though there only be a small chance for each of these acorns to become a mighty oak, let us give them that chance. Let's keep just 2, one for you and one for me." And they went together and they scattered the rest of the acorns. And so the wise man stayed on the mountain, and people came and gave him food in exchange for his remedies. And when the need was there, he donned the cloak and the scarf, and he went down to tend to the sick. And the villagers saw these visits as blessings, and they were blessings to him as well, for he could see that the mothers he tended were his mother, and the men his father, the boys his brothers, and the girls his sister. Well, time passed, and the young boy had long since grown up and stopped coming to see the wise man. When he appeared at the hut one day, he raised his hands in despair as he told the wise man that his beloved wife had died giving birth to their child, taking the child with her. "I have lost all hope," he said. "Sit with me," said the wise man. And then he gave him a sack of stones. "You must go on a journey," he said. "Each day take a stone. Let your hand that is warmed with the blood of your heart that flows through your body warm the stone. Give it some of your sorrow. At the end of the day, cast it into the river. Your loss will not go away, but you can find peace of mind, and that is the first step. And so the young man wandered, and each day he took a stone and he gave some of his sorrow to it and he cast it into the stream. And after a year, he did feel a little better. Weary of traveling, he returned to the mountain and he went to see the wise man. He found him sitting cross-legged outside his hut, smiling in the cool autumn air. But when he greeted him, the wise man did not respond. Respectfully, he sat before him and waited. All day he waited, and still the wise man did not acknowledge him. And so he spoke. "I wish to thank you," he said. "You have helped me with the pain of the past. Now I am ready to feel hope for the future, but I do not know how to find it. Will you help me again?" Still, the wise man did not respond. And then he noticed a soft light emanating from him, and he realized that the wise man was no longer breathing. And so he picked him up, now light as a bird, and he laid him out on the bed in the little cot in the hut, and then he buried him in a clearing nearby. Well, the next day, a young girl appeared at the hut. "Wise man," she said, "my mother is dying. Please help." Well, the young man did not have the heart to tell her that the wise man had departed this world. And so he gave her a bundle of the wise man's herbs. But after she left, he kept thinking about her and he wondered, did I give her the right remedy? And he went to look at the wise man's herbs more closely. And when he did so, he noticed on a low shelf the long green cloak, and he recognized it as that of the healing woman who had come to help save his sister so many years ago, and he was not surprised. Evening was falling, and he went outside to watch the moon rise to illuminate the river and bejewel the sea. And as he sat there, he could feel the wise man there with him. And then a strange thing happened. It was as if he saw the world with the wise man's eyes. The wise man's eyes were his eyes, and his eyes were the wise man's eyes. The wise man's hands were his hands, and his hands were the wise man's hands. He thought again of the little girl, and he asked himself, what would the wise man do? And then he put on the green cloak, and he wrapped the scarf around his face. And he went down to the village, and he found the cottage, and he went in, and he laid his hands upon the mother's forehead. And he said a silent prayer. And when he left, the father followed him out. "Thank you, mother," he said, "for blessing my wife, for you have brought light into our cottage where there was none before." And as the young man walked back up the mountain, he thought of the wise man and of how he must have taken this trip hundreds of times over the years, wearing this very cloak. And then he realized there was a pocket in the cloak, and in the pocket, a small cloth pouch. There in the moonlight, he reached into it and he pulled out a single acorn. For a long moment, he gazed at the acorn, and then he put it back into his pocket and continued up to the hut. He went inside and he sat cross-legged on the floor with his eyes shut. He saw the glimmer of the moon on the dark, moist sea. He saw his wife and his child. He saw his parents and his grandparents. And then he allowed his mind to open out into the universe, and his heart opened into the pathway of stars. And he was filled with joy and with love for every living thing. The next morning, he remembered the acorn in the pocket of the cloak. And this time, as he reached into the pouch for it, he noticed a piece of paper folded neatly underneath it. He unfolded the paper, and there, in a careful script, was a message he was sure was for him. "I cannot give you what you already possess," it said. "Hope, my son, is what we are able to find within ourselves to give to others." Well, the wise man took his cloak, he folded it neatly, and he put it with his scarf on the shelf below his herbal remedies. And then he took the acorn and he placed it on his windowsill where he would be sure to see it each morning. That's it.
Thank you so much, Deborah. We can all take heart in the lessons from your story, and we all play a part in helping others. Next up is Lori Hutchinson. Lori has been a member of Around Town Tellers since its inception 13 years ago. She helps out with the financial administration of the group, and she also loves to tell stories. So please welcome Lori Hutchinson.
Hi, I'm Lori Hutchinson, and I am so excited to be with you tonight or today. Oh my, I'm going to tell you a true story, and it took place in 1998. At that time, I lived in Edmonton, Alberta. I live in Nanaimo now, and at that time I worked for the federal government. Every once in a while, the government would send me on a course. So away I went for a weekend, and on the first day, the instructor said something very different. She said, "How do you know how far out your aura goes or how far you radiate who you are?" And of course, we're government workers. We kind of looked at her a little strange and thought, okay, where's she going with this? This is a government course. And she said, well, every day you affect who is around you. She said, so here I have an exercise for you. She said, go out on the street, walk down the street, she said, and look people in the face, smile, and think, only think, I love you. Well, we all looked at her. She was a little strange. She said, go down the street, smile at people, look them directly in the face, and think, I love you. Well, I usually take 2 or 3 things home from a workshop, whether it's work-related or home-related. And this one wouldn't leave me. It just wouldn't leave me. I'm thinking, am I really going to do this? I got back to work and I shared this with my coworker, Lorraine Johnson. She said, oh, that sounds so cool. We should do that today. It was a gorgeous sunny day, perfect day to do it. She said, let's go out at lunch hour and do it together. I said, okay. So off we went. Now you got to imagine Lorraine, she's 4'11", cutest little blonde. And I'm taller and darker, and off we go. I'm kind of like weird twins here. And we're going down the street. Now you've got 2 women staring at each person coming at them, smiling and thinking, I love you. How would you feel if you were going by people who were staring you in the face and you had no idea what they were doing? And then when I think about it now, it actually makes me laugh. But we did this. I have no idea how the people felt. I have no idea, but we know how we felt when we got back to the office. We were pumped. We were just so pumped. It was our best day of the week. There was joy. Something happened. It happened to us. This was really cool. I never thought about it again, really. And back to work we went. Now, a couple weeks later, I had to pick up a book at Audrey's bookstore after work. And in those days, not like today, but in those days, I had a routine. I would get right on the LRT, which is the Underground in Edmonton. I would go home. I would make my kids supper. We would do homework. I was a single parent with 3 teenagers. You had a routine. But this one day, I'd ordered a book from Audrey's bookstore, and off I went. That was only a few blocks down the street before, I'd head home. This man comes up beside me. And I look sideways at him, and he starts talking to me, and I'm thinking, do I know you? And all of a sudden, he gets interrupted, and a friend stops him on the street, and I can hear him say, Ken. And I look sideways. I thought, I do not know this man. I don't. Anyways, I heard over my shoulder, I gotta go, I'll call you later. And this man runs back up beside me. And I think, okay, Okay, and he says a couple more sentences, then he gets interrupted again. And I'm thinking, oh, good, I'm going to get to Audrey's bookstore, and he won't know where I've gone. And I honestly didn't quite know what to do with him. And I heard him over my shoulder again. I gotta go. And he runs back up beside me. And he said, would you like to go for a cup of coffee? And at this point, we're stopped at a stoplight. And there's Audrey's right across the corner, kitty corner from us across the street. And I said, well, I'm picking up a book and I'm heading home. I got 3 kids to feed. Oh, he said, I've got to have a coffee with you. And I said, why? And why? He said, well, it was a couple weeks ago, he said. And I was walking down Jasper Avenue and I went by you and I have no idea what happened. But he said, I felt so good. He said, I just knew if I ever saw you again, I'd have to have a cup of coffee with you. Ah, how could I refuse? We went and had a coffee. And it was the day Lorraine and I were walking Jasper Avenue, splatting love all over the place, one person at a time. Now it's 2020. And what I learned that day about my aura, or whatever you want to call the energy around us, going out and touching those who don't even know us. What I learned that day is so important right now. Yes, I'm walking down the street right now. And I'm 6 feet away from you, or 2 meters. And I'm saying, I love you, quietly in my head. Now, some people are still looking up at the sky when you do that. And some people still turn away or look at their feet. But more and more are staring me right in the face and saying, I love you too. I'm so glad you're here today, listening to our stories. And I hope to see you in person soon. Goodbye.
Thank you, Lori. Such a powerful story for today's circumstances. May we always remember to share our love silently and verbally with our friends, family, and strangers. Next up in the lineup is me. I am going to share a story that I have written. I began storytelling a couple of years ago when I took the art and craft of storytelling workshop and started writing personal stories shortly thereafter. This is my latest story. Good evening. I'm Pat Forrest, and this is my story that I've written. It's called Choosing to Follow. I'm following my husband Tom on my bike on a day trip around Nanaimo. We are 2 years into retirement, 2 years of traveling, sailing, biking, and putting down roots in our new hometown. Out of the blue, Tom says, let's ride our bikes across Canada. What? Really? I keep pedaling until I see the possibilities. We can do whatever we choose. We're healthy and have the time and resources. Tom wants to do it. Oh, why not? Back home, Tom researches the best bikes and gear while I find the answer to my questions. How many miles is it? How long will it take? I find books, blogs, and videos. Some gave up due to health issues, financial difficulties, mechanical failures. We watch a video of a solo biker on a miserable night, huddled in his pup tent, whipped by the wind on the side of the Trans-Canada Highway, while the rain drips onto his sleeping bag. Only to pack up all his gear the next day and continue riding down the road. I'm inspired by people's perseverance until they finally dip their wheels into the Atlantic Ocean in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. Tom's latest plan is coming together. They almost always do. I've been following Tom on bikes for decades. We met in Calgary in the 1980s, and we rode the bike paths there that disappear into green spaces beside flowing rivers. On a Labor Day weekend back then, we rode from Lake Louise to Jasper over 2.5 days on the spectacular Icefields Parkway. In Banff National Park, yeah. That first morning, I kept hearing, "It's just around that next corner." Well, you see that ridge over there? It's just over that next ridge. Oh, just keep pedaling. My reward for climbing to the summit of the Columbia Icefields was the best hot dog lunch I'd ever had. Another weekend back then, we took our bikes on the train from Calgary to Banff and then rode back the next day, starting in the majestic Rocky Mountains, coasting at times through the changing landscape of the foothills, and then back into town. A few blocks from home, after completing our first century ride, 100-mile bike ride. A car runs a red light and misses Tom by inches. Angry words fly, but Tom's quick reactions prevent any injuries. We're young and invincible, and we're soon planning our next bike adventure over beer and nachos. Kids arrive. Biking continues. The years and the miles fly by. And now I'm alone again, following Tom on my bike. We're in the scenic but challenging loop around Red Rock Canyon outside of Vegas in February 2014. We're test driving our new bikes in anticipation of our upcoming trip across Canada. I'd fallen in love with the color candy apple red. I'm ablaze with color, from my purple shorts to my pink jersey, fluorescent green jacket, bright lemon yellow panniers, front and back, holds gear, food, rain gear, and removable arm and leg warmers. I'm ready to ride across Canada. But I have a problem. I'm grinding up a steep incline in the lowest gear, inching forward in the canyon. Push, pull, round and round my feet go, one slow revolution at a time. I can't release my new clip-in bike pedals until the hill flattens out. The clips are new. I had resisted them on my old bikes, but I was certain that I could master them. You just need to twist your foot to the side before the bike stops. When the bike stops with my feet frozen in place, I fall helplessly sideways to the ground. I know what I need to do, but I can't stop pushing forward long enough to twist sideways. At last, the hill flattens, and I release my clips, stop to enjoy the spectacular scenery, and then back on my bike to catch up with Tom. I leave one foot unclipped for the rest of the day. The traffic on the highway back to Vegas is moving well. I'm thinking about conversations I've had with my brothers over my upcoming trip across Canada. One brother said, "Are you crazy? Trish, give your head a shake." Another, "Hey, I know you can do it, but why? Come cycling in France instead." And a third, "Oh, what a great trip. I wish that I could do that too." The hotels in Vegas are coming into view. Another day of cycling is almost done. I'm looking forward to the hot tub and then riding the roller coaster at the New York casino before supper. Up ahead is an intersection, a road coming in from a residential neighborhood. I watch a pickup truck stop at the stop sign and then accelerate onto the highway just as Tom rides through the intersection. I brake and watch as Tom bounces off the fender, swerves into the ditch, releases his bike clips, and then jumps off his bike, upright and unharmed. It is a magical feat of acrobatics that I envy, but could not replicate if my life depended on it. The truck stops. Tom pounds on the hood. Adrenaline-laced profanities stream through the air. The driver is shaky and apologetic. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. Are you okay? I really didn't see you." I believe him. Despite our bright panniers, fluorescent jackets, candy apple bikes, he didn't see us. He was looking for cars, and there weren't any. Just two bicycles, one following the other down the road. Maybe my brothers are right. Maybe I should give my head a shake. Maybe I can ride across Canada. Maybe it will be the best trip ever. I know I can do it. Push, pull, one revolution at a time. When I set my mind and my heart, I can do almost anything. I make up my mind. I'm not going to follow Tom on my bike across Canada. This time, I'm choosing a different path. Thank you. Our last teller tonight is Ian Gartshore. Ian is a frequent teller and a frequent audience member at Around Town Tellers. His story tonight is called Daughter of Hope.
The Daughter of Hope. Those of you who know me may not realize, but I'm actually 5 years older than the last time you saw me. You say, what do you mean 5 years older? I've come back in time from the year 2025. I know that this time with the COVID-19 is a very difficult time, a challenging time, and lots of people are afraid and anxious and not sure what to do with this and what's going to come out of it. So I've come back from the year 2025 to tell you that there is really good news, that this crisis will actually be turned into an opportunity, that humans on this planet, this beautiful planet, pictured here, are going to take advantage of and use for the good. I'm going to tell you through a story of a couple that married and had a daughter. The couple met when they were in high school in the mid-'80s. They were a bit amused by the fact that their names were spelt almost the same way, even though the sound was quite different. Just the first letter was different. They became friends. And eventually, before high school was out, they had become lovers. They really enjoyed each other. They loved the kind of energy that they had together. They soon, after high school, decided to live together. And within about 6 or 7 months of living together, to their surprise, Zoe became pregnant. Zoe was shocked, of course, because they hadn't planned on this. She was busy studying biology and chemistry in university and loving it. She didn't plan on having a child, and they weren't prepared for this. But after they got over their initial shock, they decided to go ahead with this pregnancy because they both loved kids. Now, I need to tell you a little bit about their families because it pertains quite a bit to their story. Joe was a hardworking, smoking kind of guy. He was raised by parents in Burnaby where they had a business manufacturing parts. And Zoe came from a mixed family. It was an interesting family. Her father was of Spanish background, passionate and fiery sometimes, but a wonderful man. And her mom was actually a First Nations extract. She was a daughter of a First Nations woman. And she got her gentleness and her wisdom from her mom. So the couple coming together had lots to offer to each other and to their relationship. And they decided to keep this pregnancy. And as time went by, they got more and more excited about it. They began to think about names and what they would do and start setting up an area for their baby. And the families, of course, were so pleased after they got over the initial shock, and they began to give all kinds of things that would be necessary for their new child. But I told you at the beginning that there were going to be difficult times in this story, and this was one of them. For tragedy struck. The child was stillborn. It was such a hard time for both of them, but particularly for Zoe. She was heart-stricken. At first, Joe just seemed to smoke more and work more. He didn't know what to do with this difficulty and with the pain that she was experiencing. And he was too, but he didn't want to admit to it. He was trying to be strong, you know. But eventually he realized that, well, he loved his wife a lot and she was suffering a great deal. And so they decided together to go to see a therapist, a couples therapist. It was very fun and helped them through this painful time, this grief, this loss, this disappointment, and helped them to grow stronger together, to grow closer to each other, which worked really well. As I told you earlier, they had a lot to give to each other. And after a few months, they were back to experiencing more times of joy, still some sorrow, but more joy. Eventually, they decided that they wanted to have another child. It took 2 years of trying before, with tears in her eyes, Zoe told Joe that they were pregnant. And of course, they related and celebrated that and decided to call the baby, whether it was male or female, the Spanish name or word for hope, because they had been hoping for this child. Well, their child was born by natural methods on time, and she was a healthy baby. They called her Espera, hope. Also in Spanish, the word for wait. They had waited for a long time for her to come. They were such happy parents. By then, Zoe was finishing up her university and had been hired by a local tech company. She was very pleased with that decision. And after her time taking care of her baby for the first number of months, she went back to that company and started to develop vaccines for the coronavirus because it had already struck their community. Now, Zoe was very interested in this virus, scared too, because she had friends, plus her own father and grandfather, who smoked quite a bit. Well, that was Joe's parents, but they were like her parents. She was concerned about how they would do with this virus. So she happily started looking into researching ways to help make people healthier, to keep them healthier. But she also, the small tech company, began to push them to look at ways to use more natural methods because she had been studying a great deal about her First Nations background. She had been learning about the herbs and plants that they had used to help themselves through times of epidemics and illnesses and diseases. She began to push them to go further in this regard. And they said, well, there's no money to be made because we can't patent any of those things. And so it's really not a good idea for us. We're not going to lose money doing that. But she kept that passion going. And once the virus began to hit, some people, such as Zoe herself, began to realize that there might be some promise in these essential oils and other plants that could help people, at least with their immune system, if not outright to take down the virus. As the virus began to take hold and people began to die, the federal government began to listen to wise voices because they too didn't know really how to handle this pandemic. We'll hear more about that later on, because their child would grow up to be part of that movement. Their girl, their proud parents that they were, who ended up not being able to have any other children, lavished all their time and attention on Espera, who became a very passionate, wise, and caring human being, gaining from both sides of her family. It was this Espera, their hope, who learned how to take the wisdom given to her by her parents to go further in this field, the biotech field. So I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but I want you to know that hope is coming. But I want to say that after I tell you that the virus got into Joe's father's lungs and it killed him. The medical system was quite overwhelmed at the time. Not totally. People were being good. They were being socially distant. And so the curve wasn't as bad as it was in countries and places like New York. And so not as many people, friends died, but Joe's father, yes, he had been a heavy smoker. He had developed COPD anyways, which was eventually going to take his life. And so they were very sad, but at least they had each other. Zoe and her mom and Joe's mom held together as they worked through that difficult time that you are experiencing now. You know it well. I want to tell you more about Espera. She grew and became strong and wise, very passionate and courageous young woman who too, after she grew up and graduated, joined the tech company. She loved biotechnology as much as her mom did. And it was her that pushed the company even further than her mom had to push the federal government to investigate the essential oil world and other medicinal herbs and other natural products that have never really been tested adequately to know whether they are safe, whether they are effective. As part of that push, doctors began to get more knowledge in that area because as they became proven to be effective in many different treatments of illnesses, other things began to change too, because nature was not doing well. This pandemic had shown people how much pollution there was in the air and how much asthma was being produced by traffic and other sources of pollution. And so the federal government, being pushed by Zoe and Espera and others, thousands and thousands of others across Canada, pushed them to bring changes in the world. Changes to not only technology to do with healthcare, but also energy, to end the subsidies of fossil fuels. And the monies from that were increasingly being used and are increasingly being used in 2025 to bring about clean energy, to bring about more opportunities for people to get around in healthy and safe ways. Bicycle paths are being built everywhere, including in Nanaimo. Bus transit systems were multiplied many times over because it was recognized that they were a much cleaner, much better way of getting people around, particularly once they became electric. Other changes have been taking place since these leaders and others have been forcing governments around the world to clean up their act, to clean up our act, to make it possible for hope to reign supreme. And as a result, food began to be increasingly grown organically. Pesticides and herbicides were eventually shown to be ineffective because nature only overcame them, and that good topsoil was being lost at an alarming rate. Other things changed as well, not only transportation and healthcare, but also people. Because when people emerged from COVID-19, especially after the next one that came along, people emerged from those crises stronger than ever, realizing that they didn't want to just be producers and consumers, but they wanted to also connect with each other. Rates of anxiety and depression dropped. Homelessness began to go away when parking lots began to be transformed into housing units, not only for the homeless people, but for everybody. They were very convenient to places of shopping and employment, so people didn't need to get around in their cars as much. Transit was so easy, which was so helpful for the family because, well, as it turns out, Zoe's mother and father retired in Nanaimo. So they were able to jump on BC Ferry's fast foot ferry from downtown Vancouver to downtown Nanaimo and jump on the transit hub that was so active and so easy that they found it so easy to get around. What of Nanaimo in 2025? Well, Nanaimo is not only an arts center, it's also become a hub for high tech. It's also become a place for manufacturing parts for wind turbines. And also, interestingly enough, for turbines with geothermal energy. Vancouver Island is no longer producing about 20% of its energy, electricity. It's now producing about 60% of its energy as this whole production is ramped up. It's way more secure, and people are doing way better. The energy, people are spending more time with each other, they're loving life way more. And something interesting happened out of that COVID-19 time. People realized that they've been living with a lot of fear for a long time, not just with the pandemic, but before that. Now people were getting around more with public transit and cycling and walking. They're bumping into each other. They're getting to know their neighbors more. They're feeling more happy with each other, inviting each other over for dinners and meals and beers and all kinds of things. And as a result, society was doing far, far better. I can tell you this because I'm speaking to you from the year 2025. And I can tell you that Zoe, and especially Espera, were leaders in the movement to bring about a far better world. A world that can now breathe. The people on it, the planet, the life forms in it. And no longer are the wet markets allowed in China and other places like that because this is where the viruses were coming from. Now we are respecting nature far more. Mother Nature is now called Gaia, Mother Earth. She's alive. We have a relationship with her just as much as we do with each other. We're treating her with more respect and planting. We've planted now 1 trillion trees to absorb the carbon. And we're now using farming as a method to absorb carbon when it's done well. Life is far grander and way more hopeful and something to look forward to. I know that you're suffering now, but it will not last forever. Good will come of this because of people like Espera, daughter of Hope.
Thank you, Ian, for time traveling back from 2025 to bring us good tidings from the future. I hope that all your forecasts become true. And this brings us to the end of our night. Thank you so much to our tellers, Lee Porteous, Deborah Graham, Laurie Hutchinson, and Ian Gartshaw. It has been my privilege to tell and to host with you tonight. If you want to keep up to date on Around Town Tellers, please go to our website at www.aroundtowntellers.com. We look forward to seeing you in the future. Finally, good where we've been, good where we're going to. Good where we've been, good where we're going to. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya. Good where we've been, good where we're going to. Good where we've been, good where we're going to. Good night. Stay safe.